The Director of the Office of Environmental Justice at New Jersey's Department of Environmental Protection. I want to thank all of our attendees in person and online for joining us today for our air quality session on community engagement. So thank you so much for being here. I want to give a special thanks to Groundwork Elizabeth, who is a community-based organization that really helped to partner with us on this event and get the word out and encourage people to turn out. So thank you so much to Groundwork Elizabeth. I also want to give a special thanks. Also giving a special thanks to the Recreation Center here for hosting us. So thank you so much for welcoming us into your space. So we are here to kick off our 2026 Environmental Justice Community Engagement Tour. So if you've been following OEJ over the last few years, you know that the DEP has been all across the state, meeting in every county with overburdened communities to have discussions about environmental justice. And environmental justice is such an important topic to be talking about because we know that there are communities that, because of their race and their income, experience more than their fair share of environmental pollution. And we also know that those same communities tend to have less environmental benefits, like green space and trees that cool and clean the air and soak up stormwater runoff and provide relief from the effects of extreme heat. These disparities are not just unfortunate, they are unacceptable. And so, being realistic, these disparities won't go away overnight, but the DEP does have a plan to do our part in addressing them. And so, if you're interested in speaking about this plan, any staff from the Office of Environmental Justice would be happy to speak to you about it. But tonight, what I want to focus on is a really important tool that we have to further the fight for environmental justice. And that is listening to our state's most overburdened communities so that we can make sure that we are hearing your perspectives and your insights and your testimonies so that we can use that information to do the work that we do at the DEP better. And so that is what we're here to do tonight. We're here to meet with you, listen, and to talk about our topic for tonight, which is air quality. So we're kicking off the continuation of our environmental justice tour in 2026 with a new format. So our new format is that we will have a DEP panel of experts that you'll see here, and you'll get to meet them throughout the night to share some background information about a topic that we've chosen based on information and feedback that we're hearing from community members based on our past meetings. And so tonight, the topic that we've chosen is air quality. So we're really excited to bring some information from our DEP panel of experts to you and for you to be able to ask questions of our experts and get into some good dialogue and discussion. So before I pass the mic over to our experts to walk us through some background information on air quality, I do want to first pass the mic to our newly appointed Acting Commissioner, Ed Potosnik, to give us some opening remarks.
Thanks so much, Candace. My name is Ed Potosnik, and I am Acting Commissioner at the Department of Environmental Protection. I'm very pleased to be with you today. I'm also pleased to be joined with outstanding staff. I want to thank them for their time, the great work they do every single day, and they also represent, I would say we have over 3,000 people at the department that are working to protect your air, water, and land from the very northern reaches of our state and the western side, the eastern side, along the shore, all the way to the southernmost reaches. And this is Employee Recognition Week. And so let's give them a round of applause for the great work that they do. I'm also really happy to be here today, too, to hear from all of you about what your experiences are, about the work that we do at the DEP and what we're doing well and then what we can keep doing, and then also what we could be doing differently to help support you in your community. So I want to thank the folks here. I saw John from Groundwork Elizabeth, the great work that they do in the community in partnership with us at the DEP. It's a give and take with community members. So for all of you being here tonight, giving up your free time, you're a special individual. For those of you joining online, we appreciate your partnership and your participation as well. The staff are going to share a little bit about the great work that they do in air quality planning, regulations and permitting, as well as our mobile sources and air monitoring resources team and our air enforcement team. And so those are critical to making sure that we have clean air to breathe. And in communities that are more densely populated, where there's more traffic, more industry, quite frankly, where the Industrial Revolution was born, as my boss, Governor Mikey Sherrill, said, we also bear the scars and burdens of some of that. And that is legacy pollution, but also continued sources of pollution in those communities, including here in Elizabeth. So we're really pleased to be here to talk about those and what we can do to make communities cleaner every single day. And there's going to be statistics and research that shows efforts that we're making are actually making a difference because of communities, leaders, and right here in Elizabeth, changes have been made along the First Street corridor. I was talking to Assemblywoman Annette Quijano, who's here in the audience. She's famous from a video that she sent along, but community activists along with different partners in elected office were able to make a change, and that change reduced pollution in a community. And what we learned today will help also deliver results for the families and businesses that call Elizabeth home, but also communities like Elizabeth across our state. So the federal government has a role in its regulations of air quality. The state has its own regulations on emissions. New Jersey has something called the New Jersey Pollution Control Act, which has been law since 1954. And what that act does is it monitors and controls air pollution, setting emissions limits for individual sources, and it introduces a requirement for pollution control technologies. And it was amended in just 1967, which is quite a long time ago, and to strengthen that enforcement and take regulation. And it remains a critical tool for us to help keep that air we breathe safe and healthy. So I'm going to hand it over to the experts, and I really want to hear from all of you. And just thank you again for being here tonight. Bring us your best questions, and we'll be sure to get answers tonight or bring you answers if it requires further research. But thank you again for being here, and look forward to a great presentation and conversation.
Okay, great. So with that, we will kick it off with our first DEP expert, who is Ken Ratzman. He is the Assistant Director of our Air Quality Division within the DEP. And so he's going to give us a good overview on air permitting. So take it away, Ken. Oh, we have Mike.
I'm going to stand over here so I know what you're looking at the same time what I know what I'm talking about. Thank you for coming out tonight. We do appreciate it. These public sessions are great. I have 10 minutes to talk. I promise you I could spend an hour on each and every one of my slides if you gave me the time. It is all about education. It's all about learning and learning what's out there. So I'm going to just go through them as quickly as I can. I do encourage you, save those questions, think about the questions. And when we get into the question and answer session, that's the really important part. I want to hear what you have to say. Next slide. So overview, I'm just going to touch on four high-level subjects. There was a lot of questions at previous sessions about EP oversight. What do they do as related to what we do? So I'm going to touch on that. I'm going to touch on DEP regulations, kind of a broad overview, how our regulatory process is set up. The environmental justice rules themselves. In addition to overseeing the air permitting program, I also oversee a good portion of the environmental justice process through my office. Almost every single one of them has an air permit component. So I'm heavily involved in the environmental justice piece of it. And this is the important piece to me, that last bullet, community role and oversight. Next slide. All right. Commissioner talked about authorities. Well, there's a Federal Clean Air Act also, which is where we derive most of our authorities from. We also get our authorities from the State Act also. And I am not going to go through all these acronyms on this slide. I think there's a handout at the front table. I think it's 3-4 pages long of acronyms. I call it a spaghetti soup. I don't expect you to learn what PSD, NNSR is, NAQS is, but I do want you to understand all these numbers and letters mean something. And if you have a question about what they mean, ask us. I'm totally on board with that. We just lost video. So The first thing I'm going to highlight is what is a NAAQS, National Ambient Air Quality Standard. There's 7 standards. The ones I'm going to focus on are particulate matter, which we are in attainment for in the state of New Jersey. I'm also going to focus on ozone, which is created by emissions of NOx and VOCs. If New Jersey were a standalone state and not connected to another area, we would be in attainment for the higher standard. We are connected to some other states, so we are technically in non-attainment. Not technically, we are in non-attainment. One of the things I need to, whoops, I think you're one slide too far. Yeah. Okay, permit evaluation is based on the rules in effect. And I want to highlight that we have to follow the rules. There's things you may want us to do. We have to follow the rules. There's the things the facilities want to do. No, they have to follow the rules too. So there's things where we'd love to go above and beyond, but we need to follow the rules. And that is kind of where our mandate is. What is a facility demonstrating in their permit application? They are demonstrating in their application they are meeting all the standards, all the rules, all the requirements they're supposed to meet. Unfortunately, grand statements about we're not going to build any more gas. Well, if they meet the rules, we have to issue the permit. If individual facilities are not beholden to statewide goals necessarily. So these are some of the contradictions of state government, and I do recognize them along with you. But I highlight those because they are a challenge. Next slide, please. New Jersey is delegated for almost every single federal rule. New Jersey can be more stringent than the federal rules, but we have to be at least as stringent as the federal rule. And one rule I'm going to highlight is our air permitting rule as related to risk. We have one of the most stringent risk programs in the country. We do facility-wide risk on every single air permit application that comes in the door. That started probably 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago, but it's something I insisted on. It has been codified into the EJ regulations also, which gives it even more weight and strength. Next slide. The DEP regulations are broken into various pieces. We have a minor source program. And if you're a neighbor to a facility, you may say, I don't consider it a minor source. It's a threshold. If you don't emit over 25 tons of NOx or 25 tons of VOCs or meet one of those thresholds, you are considered a minor source. It doesn't mean they're treated any differently. It just means they have a different type of permit. A major source is somebody that is a larger emitter. And that is a comprehensive site-wide permit. I just lost you again. And I also want to highlight there's some challenges in permitting. We have something called a significant source based on the way the rule is defined. We have insignificant sources and we have exempt sources. And without getting into detail, they're all there for one reason or another historically. Again, if you ever had a question about SIG or INSIG or exempt, ask away. Again, I have 10 minutes. I just want to gloss over this, but keep those questions in mind. Next slide, please. All right, so the environmental justice rules, hopefully you are familiar with this. The environmental justice rules have, I'm not going to touch on the entire rule. I'm just going to focus on those 3 pieces that are specific to the AIR program. So first is the localized impact control technology. The complaint, and valid in my opinion, is this equipment has been out there for 20, 25, 30 years, and it's never been reevaluated. This requirement during a review of a new or, I'm sorry, I'm getting them mixed up myself. The LICT applies to new and expanded facilities, and they have to do a top-down analysis on technology and putting it on there. It is more stringent than what we have in our existing air regulations. We don't have this requirement in our air regulations. The facility-wide risk applies only to renewals at major facilities. We already have a risk program. This kind of double layers it. It's been a little bit challenging to implement. We have to get through a certain amount of the permitting before we can get into the risk, and it delays the aegis a bit, but it's an important component. It's done for all HAPs, hazardous air pollutants that are emitted at a facility. And lastly, there's a technical feasibility analysis for major sources. This is the 20-year-old one. So when we have a renewal come in, if there's a boiler that was put in 35 years ago and it hasn't been reevaluated, they got to reevaluate it under the renewal, under the environmental justice rules. Okay. Next one. So just going to touch on a couple of challenging issues that we see regularly. Odor and dust. They're both challenges. They're not a defined pollutant. We're very good at regulating a defined pollutant with a known property. When you talk about dust, it could be a whole cocktail of anything and everything. There's no way really to test for dust. What is odor? Well, that's a sensory reaction. There are certain things we can identify. When you smell rotten eggs, we know exactly what that is. That's hydrogen sulfide. When you smell trash, well, that's trash. But what is it? It is an unknown. But there are odor provisions in our regulations. And I'm going to pass off any questions on that to our enforcement team. We have mobile source rules, but we are very limited on what we can do. In fact, there's been federal rollbacks on some of the mobile things that we can do. Melissa will touch more on that. Data centers, anybody a fan? Data centers are coming. It's a challenge. We do not regulate data centers in the air program, but we do regulate the power generation at the data centers. So if they're bringing on 50 emergency generator or diesel gensets, we do look at those. If they're powering in some other method, we'll look at those. The best thing they can do is do something else that doesn't need an air permit. There's always questions about what's the appropriate level of monitoring. We'd love to put continuous emission monitors on every single piece of equipment in the state. It's not realistic. It's not cost effective. It's not reasonable to ask that. So we use a combination of continuous emission monitors, stack testing, surrogate monitoring. How do I know that control device is working? I don't need to test what's coming out. I just got to make sure it's got the proper flow rate and the pressure drop. So those are surrogate monitors. Another question that was asked, what are we doing about all these federal rollbacks? And we're getting bombarded, and we're doing the best we can. We are active members of the Ozone Transport Committee, or Commission, which is the Northeast states from Virginia all the way up to Maine. We collaboratively work together to try to tackle some of these issues. We are commenting on many federal rollbacks where we can. We're joining multi-state lawsuits where it's appropriate. And guess what? We have environmental justice. They don't. So we're sticking with the guns on that one. Next slide. All right. This is my most important slide. What should you be doing and how can you help yourselves and help us? You got to be advocates for yourself. We have public hearings for our permits. I understand why they're not the most productive and sometimes not what you want to hear. You know, we've deemed that application technically complete. I know that's a challenge, but if you're going to be commenting on that, find something that we did wrong. That is really what we're looking for in that hearing, be it process, be it the review. Ask questions early and often. And I say that because you don't need to wait for the public hearing to start asking questions. You can start asking questions when that application comes in the door. And on the bottom, I'm going to show you a tool we have that you can get more informed on. Get informed and educated. Being here tonight is a great start or continuation of your education. Some tools and opportunities. I'm going to touch on what's in my community when I'm done here. Public comment and hearing opportunities. We have our public hearings for major source permits and some minor source permits that are challenging. There's also now the EJ public hearings where the facilities are putting themselves out there. They're holding a hearing. That is an excellent opportunity for you to voice your concerns. So that is the end of what I wanted to cover. If you can just pull up the what's in my community, and this will be very brief. And Jeff, if you want to play with this during yours, you're welcome to. This is a tool that was generated on the outgrowth of one of the Environmental Justice Advisory Council groups. I worked with Candace and her team and a bunch of stakeholders. This serves up data for every single permit in the state. Air permit, air. It serves up all the violations at a facility. If you could just zoom in, you'll see as you zoom in, you'll see different facilities, just a little more. So you'll see there's blue dots. Those are the facilities. You have monitoring stations here with wind direction. So hypothetically, you're in your neighborhood. And if you zoom in just a little more, pink dots will show up. Those are the minor facilities. Okay. You smell something in the air. You want to report a violation. You want to report something. You go to this tool. You can maybe identify what's in your neighborhood. You can identify what the wind direction is. So when you report it, you're doing some smart reporting. When you go and you ask questions, this is where it is. This tool has permits. It has emission statement data. It has enforcement violations. It's got monitoring data. And you can just put your address in up on top and it'll bring you to that local neighborhood. I went through a lot of material very quickly, a little more than 10 minutes. But I just wanted to give you a flavor of what we're dealing with. There's a lot of information out there. And the permitting process is just one of our challenges. I hope you get to keep these slides. There are links in there to what's in my community. There's links into some other material. I'll hold, I think we want to hold questions until we're all done. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ken. And yes, we will send out the slides to all of the attendees following this session. So stay tuned for that. Okay, next we're going to have Melissa Evanego. She is the Assistant Director of the Bureau of Air Monitoring and Mobile Sources. And Melissa is going to give us a good overview on air monitoring.
Hello. I don't have a presentation. I'm going to leave that up to Anthony and to Robin, who oversees the Bureaus of Air Monitoring and Mobile Sources. But I just wanted to say a few words to give you some context to what our division does and how we coordinate with the other two divisions that are here. Like Ken said, we could each talk for an hour or more on our topics, but we're limited. We want to give you enough information. So we're just going to give you teasers for you to take back, try to understand what we do in the little bit of time that we have, and then raise any questions at any time, whether it's tonight or another time. So in the Division of Climate Change Mitigation and Monitoring, there are 4 bureaus, but 2 of them really have an impact on air quality. So the first bureau is the Bureau of Air Monitoring. So the way that we work with the Division of Air Quality is the monitoring data that are shared with some of the folks in the Division of Air Quality. And that data is used as the foundation to understanding and to see if we meet the state's national ambient air quality standards. We also provide them the data for them to look at the trends. So what are the air quality trends for the different pollutants over the years? So those are all important things that we evaluate, we make public. It's on our website. A quick example, just again, to give you context. So probably going back about a decade ago, one of the air monitors had really high levels of sulfur dioxide. There was no stationary source that was in the area that would give them reason to give us reason why that monitor was so high. So after further evaluation, it turns out that there was a power plant in Pennsylvania that had these high levels. So coordination between air monitoring and air quality, they sited a monitor across the river from the power plant in New Jersey. That monitor collected data. We petitioned EPA to go after and do something against that power plant. And so eventually what happened was EPA required that power plant to put in controls, emission controls, and then eventually that power plant closed. So that's an example of collaboration, and that led to healthier air for the residents of New Jersey, even though the power plant was outside of New Jersey. An example of the coordination between air monitoring and enforcement was, again, a number of years ago. There was a monitor in Fort Lee by the George Washington Bridge, was reading really high particulate matter for a couple of days. Enforcement went out, investigated it, and turned out that there were trucks, heavy-duty trucks that were idling very close to the monitor. And what they were doing was they were staging there, waiting to go across the George Washington Bridge into New York to either pick up or drop off their load. So, so they had to idle on the New Jersey side because the facility wasn't open yet. So just a couple of examples of how we're coordinating on the air monitoring side. As far as the transportation side, transportation is of all types of equipment and vehicles throughout the state. The partnerships that we have with our sister agencies are really important, whether it's motor vehicles or DOT or New Jersey Transit. The planning organizations, very important, obviously EPA as well. The relationship with Division of Air Quality, they use a lot of the programs that we have, the emission benefits that we get from those programs, and they put it in the state implementation plans that get submitted to EPA. The Division of Air Quality is a strong partner in working with mobile sources against idling. Our cargo handling equipment rule, which is phasing out either equipment that has no control emissions or very few control emissions. So enforcement has been a big partner there, and they've been extremely a big partner with us going after vehicle owners that modify the emission controls on their vehicles. So again, we need that enforcement partnership. We also have been working very closely with the Port Authority over the years and South Jersey Port to reduce emissions from ports and airports. And then obviously the relationship that we have with communities throughout the state, we've been working with for many, many years. And those partnerships are really important to understand what the communities are facing, what they're hearing, and what they're seeing. And for us to understand what's happening at that level so we can address those issues. So I'm going to pass it over to Anthony Carl, who's the Bureau Chief for the Bureau of Air Monitoring.
So good evening, everybody. My name is Anthony Carl. I'm Bureau Chief for the Bureau of Air Monitoring. Is that my slideshow up yet? Okay. So my bureau is responsible. Actually, it's not yet. Go to the next one. Put up. Oh. Yeah, it's different than what I remember it. Okay, I'll fly with it. All right, so I'm with the Bureau of Air Monitoring. My bureau is responsible for the operation and maintenance of 29 air monitoring stations throughout the state, and we're also responsible for community-based monitoring programs. Next slide. This is a map of our monitoring stations. So our focus is primarily on the criteria pollutants in order to meet the NAAQS standards that Ken talked about earlier. Those priority pollutants are carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, ozone, lead, and particulate matter. And so if you notice on the map, you can see our 29 air monitoring stations, and you see that there's a focus on the northeast of the region, right, of the state. That's done purposefully. That's where our population density is. And so we want to put all of our, or as many of our monitors up in that area as we can in order to protect as many people as possible. Now, with that being said, we do have them scattered throughout the state to get information for the greater region. And again, these are regional. This is to make informed decisions primarily for regional things as per the Clean Air Act. All right, these are regulatory monitors. Throughout this network, we have over 100 analyzers at our stations. They're reporting data back in real time to a data aggregation software database, and we are able to then compare that to the National Ambient Air Quality Standards to determine compliance with federal law. Next slide. Okay, so this is the this slide is a summary of the federal requirements, right? So you can see on there, there's a lot of statistics that go into calculating all of that. So I don't want to bore you with all of that. But it is important because these are the standards that we do need to meet. So we take our data and we compare it, we do averages, we do statistical analysis, and we get these numbers that then get compared to those national ambient air quality standards, right? So that being said, if you go to the next slide, this is what we're able to report to the public so they don't have to digest what I just showed you, right? This is a lot easier. This is the air quality index. So essentially what we do is we take, particulate matter and ozone levels that go into a calculation, and they come out with this air quality index. And then we're able to show it based on color code. So it's nice and easy and digestible for the general public. This is especially important for people if they have pre-existing conditions, if they're susceptible with asthma or something like that to ozone and to particulate matter. So we want to make sure that the information is as easily digestible as possible. Next slide, please. So this is one of the tools we can use and anybody can sign up for. This is the EnviroFlash notification system that's run through EPA. Basically, you can sign up for notifications for air quality. It will give you notifications when the air quality is going to be poor, and you could check periodically to determine what the air quality is so you can plan your days, especially if you have pre-existing conditions. Next slide. So in addition to that EnviroFlash app, we also have our website, the air monitoring website up at the top, and the AirNow.gov website, which is US EPA hosted. The US EPA hosted website primarily looks at that AQI value more than our website. Our website links to all of our data at all of our monitoring stations. That is any of it that's collected in real time. So at any time, you can go into one of these sites and check our data. Now, this is not vetted data. It's not certified data. We have to go through a certification process every year, but it's what our monitors are seeing at any given time. So you can at any time go in there and see. And if you click on the monitoring stations, they will have a color code to them as well that speaks to that AQI, so everything's consistent. So if you're looking at your local area, you can click on the monitor in your local area, which we do have a monitoring station here in Elizabeth at the Turnpike exit 13. You can just go in there and see what your local monitor's telling you, right? So those are pretty much the ways that we can notify the public and keep them abreast of what's going on. Next slide. So one of our other functions is community science monitoring. So we've run in the past, and we do have some sensors out there now, a sensor loan program, whether it's Purple Air or one of the other manufacturers, where community organizations and educational institutions can get our sensors, put them out, run projects with them, science-based projects to determine air quality in the local community. It's a good way to get the community engaged. It's a good way to get students engaged into air monitoring, and it's also it does inform as to what's going on in the local level, right? Where again, our monitors are primarily focused on what's going on in the region, right? So this is a good tool to do that, but the only issue that this isn't as good as our federally regulated monitors. They're more precise and more accurate, but they do inform as to local air quality air quality conditions. Next slide. And so finally, we have our mobile air monitoring project that's been running. We completed our first round of sampling in the Newark South Ward and Ironbound neighborhoods in Elizabeth and in Camden. We took that nice van, if you see up in the right-hand corner, from Carnegie Mellon University, We coordinated with them and with UC Riverside as partners who will be collecting the data, doing some data analysis for us, and trying to inform what's going on in these communities at the hyperlocal level, right? So this van has been driving around 2 weeks at a time through these neighborhoods, gathering data with very high precise analyzers. And again, we're looking at, what is going on in these communities, and is there something that we need to be concerned about? Is there something that we can find? And ultimately to try to inform us as to what kind of pollutants people are being exposed to on any given basis. Now, again, this is a snapshot because again, we can't do this year round, but it provides us a good snapshot, over the next 2 years with 4 campaigns in total, winter and summer, to really look at the local community and see what's going on. So that's going to be the focus of that project. And so that's pretty much the Bureau of Air Monitoring in a nutshell. So, please have questions when we do the question and answer session. Thank you.
Okay, testing. Okay, great. Thank you, Melissa and Carl. All right, so we're going to switch over and are we still having Robin? You're still going, Robin? Okay, so we're going to continue on air monitoring, and we're going to talk more about emissions, and we're going to have Robin Heston Murphy. She's the chief of the Bureau of Mobile Sources. So thanks, Robin.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Like Candace said, my name's Robin Heston Murphy, and I'm the Bureau Chief for the Bureau of Mobile Sources. The Bureau of Mobile Sources has been working on reducing emissions from the transportation sector for the last 20 years. Our 20th anniversary was last month, so we're very happy about that. And I'm going to go over how transportation contributes to air pollution and what programs we have put in place to reduce that impact. Next slide. So mobile sources are vehicles and equipment that move and release pollution into the air. So the simple way to think of it is if it has wheels and an engine, it's probably a mobile source. These include on-road and off-road vehicles. So it would include cars, trucks, and buses, but then also construction equipment, cargo handling equipment that's at the ports, the ground support equipment at airports, and even marine engines, which I know boats don't have wheels, but they're still considered a mobile source. So that's the one exception to my wheels and engine analogy. Next slide. There are 3 main areas where transportation has a major impact on air quality. These are the criteria pollutants, which include carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxide, and volatile organic compounds. And then there's the diesel particulate matter, and that's the black soot and tiny particles that are emitted from diesel engines. So the engines in cars, not cars, the engines in trucks and buses. And then there's the greenhouse gas emissions, which is mainly the carbon dioxide being emitted by the vehicles. And this traps heat in the atmosphere and contributes to climate change. So all of these pollutants are released when vehicles burn gasoline and diesel fuel. Next slide. So I'm going to give you more information on each of these pollutants and then what we are actually doing to address them from a transportation perspective. Next slide. With the criteria pollutants, like I said, it's carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxide, and volatile organic compounds. And the combination of these pollutants is what contributes to the formation of ozone, like Ken had referenced earlier. So transportation is responsible for 92% of the carbon monoxide that's produced in the state and 78% of the nitrogen oxide. So transportation is a huge factor in these pollutants. And this is these percentages are when you combine both the non-road and the on-road sources. Mobile sources are not as large of a contributor for the volatile organic compounds, but they still represent a significant portion at 38%. So this is the reason why we do so much to address emissions from transportation. Next slide. So the DEP has implemented programs to reduce emissions of the pollutants from all these mobile sources. We have an enhanced inspection and maintenance program in New Jersey. The inspection and maintenance program is to ensure that the emission control technology that's installed on the vehicles is actually functioning correctly and is reducing emissions from those vehicles. We run this program in conjunction with the Motor Vehicle Commission. The Motor Vehicle Commission operates the inspection stations, and then DEP goes out and audits or inspects the inspection stations to make sure that they are actually doing, the equipment is working correctly, they're testing correctly, and that all the inspections are being done correctly. And there are over 6 million registered vehicles in New Jersey. So that, again, is another reason why there are so much emissions from this sector. Passenger vehicles are, of course, required to be inspected every 2 years for emissions. And then the commercial vehicles are inspected every year. Next slide. Idling is a large contributor to these criteria pollutants. So we have a law prohibiting idling for more than 3 minutes. There are some exemptions from the law, especially for emergency vehicles, but in general, you should not be idling your vehicle for more than 3 minutes. And you want to not idle to reduce emissions, but also to save money with gasoline costing so much right now. And there's no reason to be idling your car and burning that gas if you're not actually going somewhere. Exactly. We have launched an anti-idling outreach campaign to encourage everyone to wait clean and stop idling after 3 minutes. So we've been launching that throughout the state. Next slide. To address the off-road mobile sources, we've been working with the Port Authority and airlines that operate out of Newark Airport to provide grants for the electrification of the ground support equipment at the airport. The equipment can include the electric baggage tractors, belt loaders, and my personal favorite, the pushback tugs, which those are the really cool equipment that just pushes the plane back from the gate and then puts it in place for the mobile taxiing. Those can all be electrified, and we can reduce emissions from all of those. And we've also provided funding for the replacement of older port and construction equipment, and we're replacing that with newer equipment that produces less emissions. Next slide. So the second pollutant category is diesel particulate matter. Next slide. Diesel vehicles make up only 7% of the vehicles that are on the road, but they account for 25% of the transportation emissions and 29% of the greenhouse gas emissions. So they are a big portion of this sector. The diesel particulate matter, it's what we commonly just refer to as soot. That contributes to asthma and other respiratory issues. So this is one of the reasons why it's so important to address this. Next slide. These are maps of the predicted risk of getting cancer from diesel particulate matter. And you can see the changes over time to the risk factors throughout the state. In the Northeast area in 2011, you'll see the really dark purple and the really harsh colors. Those were the levels that we didn't want. In the Elizabeth area, the risk went from over 500 in a million in 2011 down to between 100 and 200 million in 2020. So these maps show from 2011, 2014, 2017, and 2020. So the levels we have now are still too high, but they're getting better. And this shows that all of the trends are going down, and all of the things that we've been working towards are helping. Next slide. So we've achieved these reductions through various programs. We have the diesel modernization program, and that provides grants to offset the cost of upgrading the older construction and port equipment, as well as on-road vehicles and marine engines, and upgrading those to newer and cleaner versions. Some of them being electric versions, but not all of them. Some of them are just cleaner diesel. And then looking ahead, the next iteration of that inspection and maintenance program is going to include emission inspections of medium-duty diesel vehicles for the first time. So that's, again, another sector that we're going to be able to capture reductions in. Next slide. New Jersey was the first state to implement an anti-tampering program for diesel vehicles. We have regulations that not only prohibit tampering with the emission systems, but also selling vehicles that have been tampered with. And the picture up there is one of our supervisors who's inspecting a vehicle at a dealership. He gets really into it, making sure he's checking out all of the equipment and determining whether the emission controls are tampered with or even have been removed. Next slide. Then we also have a rule requiring the older diesel cargo handling equipment that's operating at the ports to be phased out and replaced with newer and cleaner equipment. As of March of last year, all cargo handling equipment must have emission controls. And then we have stricter emission control requirements being phased in through 2028. Next slide. And the final category of pollutants is greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide. And the transportation sector is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions as well. We're number one in a lot of these categories, which is probably not a good thing. So like I said before, with greenhouse gas, it's mainly carbon dioxide that we're concerned with. And since 2019, DEP, the Board of Public Utilities, and Economic Development Authority have provided over $700 million to help businesses and local governments electrify their fleets and reduce all of these emissions. And our grant programs cover not only the vehicles and equipment, but also charging stations for them as well. And another program we have is our electric school bus grant program, and we're going to be launching our third round of grants for purchasing electric school buses at the end of June. So we're excited about that. And funding community mobility programs, which are aimed at improving mobility within the communities through shared use transportation projects. So these, like, for example, would be community ride shares. Next slide. So this was just a high-level overview. Like everybody else said, we could talk for hours and hours about all of this. But these are just some of the things that we've been doing to reduce the emissions from the transportation sector. We have two websites that have a lot of information. The Drive Green NJ site has a lot of information on electrifying vehicles. And then our Stop the Soot website has all the other resources and also has information on our diesel modernization program and our grants programs. And so there's QR codes for both of those. Most of our grants accept applications on a rolling basis. You don't have to wait to apply for a grant for most of them. So we can always, we always want to see people applying for more of our grants. Next slide. And the last thing is I want to offer up this QR code for a survey that we've created. We want to get your feedback on what your transportation challenges are that you're facing in your communities. We want to use this information so we can design our programs and our outreach looking forward for the next 20 years and make sure that we're designing things that will actually work in the communities. And, you know, we're not just writing rules and creating programs that don't actually work at the local level. So we would love it if you could take a minute to fill out our survey, and it will really help us a lot going forward. And thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Robin. And so we'll be sure to send out that survey to all of the attendees following this session, so you'll have the link. Okay, so we're going to end with our last segment on air enforcement. So we'll have Jeff Meyer. He is the Bureau Chief with our Bureau of Air Compliance and Enforcement for the Northern Office. So take it away, Jeff.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jeff Meyer. I'm the Bureau Chief for the Division of Air Enforcement for the Northern Region. That covers the 10 northern counties from Union, Somerset, Hunterdon, north, and between both rivers, Delaware and Hudson. Next slide. So the Division of Air Enforcement, we are the enforcement branch of the department that handles just air pollution. So what do we do? We have a lot. In our region, we have about 2,500 facilities that we are responsible for inspecting. So we perform inspections at facilities with air pollution permits, which are the permits that Ken Ratzman's program approves. And we determine compliance with those permits and the conditions that Ken and his staff write into the permits. And we also determine compliance with our freestanding regulations, the Air Pollution Control Act, and there are 34 or 35 subchapters that run from open burning, volatile organic compounds, nitrogen, NOx, what am I looking for? Nitrous oxide, excuse me. And so there are many regulations. Not to be left out are the federal regulations. And there are many federal regulations. If you look at the federal regulations, if you want to sleep, go read some federal regulations because it's a whole nother language and it's pretty boring unless you do it for a living. So we do the inspections on a schedule that's we submit to EPA, and we inspect those facilities every 1 to 5 years, depending on the facility size. So when we do these inspections, we also provide compliance assistance. We answer questions. There are facilities that have a lot of questions. There are facilities that don't have a dedicated environmental staff. They have questions about how to permit, what to permit, how to be in compliance. Also, we do compliance assistance, but it's not really compliance assistance. It's almost reverse. We answer your questions. If you guys have questions about a facility near your home or your business, and you want to know what they're doing, how they do it, how they're allowed to do what they're doing, why they do what they do, if you think they shouldn't be doing something, we'll answer your questions and explain it to you. So the permits are just that. They permit air pollution. When someone gets a permit, that permit allows a certain level of air pollution to be emitted from that facility. So that's managing expectations of the public. That's something we have to do. Someone will say, I don't like this being next to me. I don't want these emissions next to me. The permit allows that to occur. Okay. It's been evaluated by Ken and their staff, and they've determined that if it meets all of the requirements, that they can go ahead and operate that piece of equipment under the conditions of that permit. So we go out and do an inspection and we find that there's some issue. They're not complying with their permit. They're not complying with some regulations. We issue enforcement actions, which may or may not include penalties depending on the level of the infraction and the length of time the infraction occurred. An NOV could be a warning. You have 30 days, 60 days, 90 days to correct the problem. An administrative order with a penalty may have a penalty as low as $200, as high as $50,000 per day. It depends on the severity of the violation, the length of time that it's been occurring. There are a lot of factors that come into calculating penalties. So the penalties are a deterrent. This is all civil enforcement. So that penalty is designed to get a violator to pay attention and say, like you and I getting a speeding ticket, we don't want to speed anymore. So the facility shouldn't be polluting, violating a permit, violating a regulation. That's what the penalties are designed to do. And then we negotiate penalty schedules and do penalty settlements. If we have a facility that has a lot of penalties, they come to us and say, look, we really want to comply. This has been going on for a little bit. And can we settle? We have discretion to reduce penalties, but we're not going to reduce penalties unless they demonstrate compliance, or they're going to demonstrate compliance. If they've demonstrated compliance, we can negotiate to make it palatable for them to operate in compliance moving forward. If they're not in compliance and there's going to be a period of time that they need to correct the problem, we'll enter into what's called an administrative consent order, which will set out milestones for them to gain compliance or come into compliance. That may be re-permitting. That may mean putting on additional air pollution control devices. That may mean reducing their production. There are a lot of different factors that come into negotiating a settlement with a facility that has air pollution violations. We have a lot of tools at our disposal, and we try to take advantage of those while making the violator still pay the penalty for their period of noncompliance. And then we assist the Attorney General's office in developing enforcement cases if a facility is going to dig in and they're going to say, we don't want to settle. We want to fight this in court. When we get a speeding ticket, we can go to court if we want to. A facility can go to court also. That process is sometimes a lengthy process. That involves deputy attorney generals from the attorney general's office, and it'll be scheduled for a hearing, and they go to a court system, which is an administrative law court system for the most part. But we can take actions that end up in Superior Court and other legal venues. So the last thing that we do is we investigate air pollution complaints. A lot of people have questions regarding that. One of the first things that people notice when they're talking about environmental issues, are there odors, are there dust, something that's impacting me on my property? I joke with the other programs that we deal with because water usually doesn't jump out of the stream, polluted water and go on your yard. You don't have garbage on your yard usually from, somebody, running up with a truck and dumping it on your property. It can happen, but it usually doesn't happen all that often. But air pollution crosses all boundaries. You can have odors from that room over there, and all of a sudden we're like, hey, what do we smell here? Hey, maybe we better get out of here, So it's the same thing with air pollution for nuisance odors, which are what we deal with 99% of the time are nuisance odors. So can I have the next slide, please? So if you're exposed to odors that are bothering you on your property, you call this number, the DEP's 24-hour number, and you report a odor complaint. And what will happen is that one of my inspectors, I have 12 inspectors for 10 counties, spread pretty thin. We contract with every county health department under the County Environmental Health Act, and their inspectors are trained to do odor investigations for us. The process is that we have to I'm going to be very brief with this because it gets a little complex, but basically, if somebody's calling in an odor complaint and saying, it smells, it's coming from this company over here, an inspector has to come out to you on your property when it's happening. We have to smell the odor with you on your property when it's happening. And then you have to be willing to sign a statement of complaint in order for us to take an enforcement action under our nuisance code. If all of those pieces fall into play and we call it verifying an odor, then we have to trace the odors back to the offending company. Sometimes it works, sometimes if the wind shifts and we can't figure out who the company is. And there were times where we were chasing odors around and we couldn't find where the source was. It sometimes takes time for us to figure out where it is. Sometimes it's a slam dunk. We know that it's a sewer treatment plant, or we know that it's a food processing plant that has smelly dumpsters or something like that. So sometimes we can do it easily, sometimes we can't. If we can't put all those pieces into play, we're not going to issue a violation, because we're not going to issue a violation that's not going to withstand a court challenge. Process of verifying a complaint, that much. There's resources on our website under enforcement and air pollution, where we have odor fact sheets, particular fact sheets that discuss how we investigate and how we enforce nuisance air pollution. And there's also our odor investigation guidelines that lay out the procedures for how we investigate an odor complaint. So those are available on the website. Some health effects, or something's weird, okay? You can call us. Release or something along those lines. That's very important because we don't do that type of response. Okay. So the next slide, please. Actually, can you go back to the first slide? Because I missed something. Oh, no. Yeah, that slide. Okay. So the other thing that enforcement does is we deal with mobile sources. That's my colleague here, Larry C. He's going to talk about mobile sources, what DEP does. If you have any questions regarding the inspection process, the odor complaint process. Happy to answer your questions. The contact information from my office is there. Elizabeth is one of the towns in my territory. You can always call my office and ask. I have an officer every day that'll be able to answer questions. If they can't answer questions, they'll kick it up to a supervisor to me. So thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Jeff. Hi there. Larry C. So I'm chief for diesel enforcement and emission measurement. So one addition to what Jeff mentioned about the odor investigation, if we didn't verify that, that's the end, not the end of the story. We can come back later, tomorrow, the next day, the next week. Anytime you smell it, call the hotline. Call the hotline. If you didn't learn anything today, go home with this card. Go home with this card. There's a number right there. Call the hotline. That's I always tell people. We may not get them today, but there's always tomorrow, and we will get them.
I want Larry, excuse me. Larry is correct. Every day, if you call once, let's say you called last week and we investigate, then 2-3 weeks go by. You think that the DEP is on it. We deal with complaints every single day. We have the counties investigating, my people investigating. Every day that it's happening is a separate and distinct violation. And if you're being affected, call every day when you're being affected by it. Okay. If you're not going to be home or something like that, that's a whole other issue. But Larry is correct. Thank you for pointing that out, that you can call every day that you're being affected by odors or air pollution that's affecting you on your property. Thank you, Larry.
And most people pay attention when it hit their pocket real bad. So let's just say Jeff's staff did a very good job. They got him, right? And then 2 weeks down the road, it smells again. We go back. If we find out in the investigation and we nail them again, that penalty goes up, usually significantly. And like you said, it can be $50,000 per day. You heard that, per day. And that gets their attention. And we get their attention because now we can go into hundreds of thousands of violations or millions. I've seen some millions penalty. It doesn't come to us, actually, the money goes to the Treasury of New Jersey. So it gets their attention. It gets to their higher up, the highest of their, and they'll say, what should we do? Well, comply with the permit and the regulation. That's the bottom line. And we won't stop. So really, it's a teamwork. Yes, we will do our job, but we need your help because really you are the eyes and ears of DEP out there. Okay? So now I'm switching gear. I'm going into mobile source, idling and tampering. You heard Robin talks about that. So my group is the face of enforcement of that. Again, same thing with idling. You probably everywhere like, oh man, you go to a Wawa, like the idling, call us, call the hotline. I may not be right there in 2 minutes for that. You just call, we collect the data. Every call that you call the hotline, it's recorded in our system. And again, we are very thin staffing wise. I can't be everywhere every day, but that data that you call in, we run reports almost on a daily basis. My staff would say, where are you going next week? Run the report. Oh, that particular, there's a lot of Wawa in the state, right? I'm not just picking Wawa. It could be 7-Eleven. It could be some other shops or some mall or shopping mall somewhere. And we look at the data, look at that. Monmouth County. Oh, look at that bus depot. This past week, we got 5 calls right there. Actually, last week, we hit one bus depot at 5 o'clock. My staff was right there in the morning. We get them. And it's penalty. And say, oh, we didn't know. Well, now you know. And so that's usually how it works. Just be patient. Not every time, I'm not going to promise you every time we're going to get them, but you just call the hotline. We'll go from there and we will get them. So thank you.
All right, can we give our speakers another round of applause? So thank you so much to our experts. They just gave you a wealth of information and sort of a snapshot into the work that they do every day at the DEP. So really grateful for them sharing that, but I hope it's given you some kind of nuggets to chew on as you've been listening and you have some good questions for us. So now's our time to transition and turn the floor over to you. So I'll give you some real simple instructions. We have a mic in the middle of the room. We'll take one person in the room, and then we are monitoring conversations and questions online. So one person in the room followed by one person online, and we'll go back and forth that way. So if you have a question for our speakers or even just a comment about your experience with air quality within your environmental justice community, we invite you to come to the mic and say your question or your comment. And then also online, if you want to raise your hand, there should be a hand icon at the bottom of your Zoom controls. That will let us know that you have a comment or a question, and you'll be in queue to go next. Also, if you are calling online on a phone, you just want to dial *9. So *9, that'll be the signal to raise your hand so that we can get you in queue. So we'll take the first person in the room. If you don't mind approaching the mic, if not, we can bring it to you.
Can you
The mic.
right here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Carol.
Just make sure it's on.
Yes, hi. My name is Carlos Candelaria. I'm a resident of Elizabeth. Your department and what you guys are doing is great. EPA, DEP, OSHA, NESHA, all of you guys are great. Okay, the idea is excellent. What's happening now? We are getting into a time where technology is taking over everything. Technology is good and it's also bad. Now you talk about regulations. We talk about regulations about laws. The same law that you spoke about it are getting you guys now. They're trying to stop you. And what's going to happen with everybody else in here? Not us, our kids. I'm a human being. I worry about my grandsons. I mean, I'm 65 years old now. Okay. How long more am I going to be around? Who knows? And I'm not going to say God because my belief on gods are different than anybody else. Okay. We all believe in our own God on our own way. I don't want to make this a big speech, but the government who regulate us and impose the laws coming after you guys now. And what are we doing about this? I mean, that's a serious concern that we should all have. What's going to happen around? I mean, chemicals, exposure. They talk about rotten smell. What about the gases that doesn't have any smell? How long before your stations analyze them? How quick does it get into the public? There's a company around here, ethylene oxide. Okay, we have Exxon back there. I've been living in Elizabeth for 40-something years. At the beginning, I used to smell something that it was unbelievable. I don't smell it anymore. I guess I'm used to it. But it's still out there. And it's concerning. It's not only concerning for us humans, but, you know, we're talking about the entire planet habitat, you know? I am so sorry to, you know, put everybody to think about it. And it's the reality, you know? The destruction that we are creating, it is us, we, the humans, who are doing all this. And, you know, basically the politicians are, I am sorry to say it, you know, that's not working. Where do we go from here? Where do we go? And I'm sorry, that's all I had to say, you know? Sorry, thank you.
Thank you so much, Carlos, and don't apologize. Thank you. I do want to pick up a question from what Carlos said. How might we be regulating or capturing chemical exposures into the air that don't have odors? So that's the first question. And then maybe if someone can talk on ethylene oxide as well.
I'll touch on a challenging industry we started regulating about 6, 7 years ago in earnest, and that was fumigation. You have port facilities, you have product coming in, be it bananas, grapes from foreign ports, and you don't want invasive species coming into your country. You don't want a four-toed sloth spider. I'm making up something there. So you want to fumigate it and make sure that that spider doesn't propagate in this country. But they use toxic substances. And the most desirable ones to use happen to be odorless and colorless. But we made great efforts to identify the facility through our enforcement counterparts. We called in all those permits, and now we have set health benchmarks of what they're allowed to emit at each of those facilities to not affect the public. So I think it's important to note we are learning as we go along, and we are addressing what we can as we go along. Specifically with ethylene oxide, it is a heavily regulated substance. It happens to be one of the substances that the federal government is backing off on. We are sticking with our standard in New Jersey. We are still regulating these sterilizers. We are still regulating facilities that use and or release ethylene oxide. So those are just two of the substances or two examples I have. Not perfect, but it is how we are addressing them one by one.
Oh, I thought you were going to do online.
So we do, yes. So we do have Ellie Gruber. I think you have your hand raised online, so feel free to unmute yourself and then go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Ellie Gruber. I'm co-chair of the League of Women Voters Natural Resource Committee. The League is a public interest organization. We balance the needs of business and residents, but we're really particularly concerned about any kind of a permit for the Williams Transco Nessie compressor station, so that pipeline can be extended through New Jersey to New York. We have scientific, irrefutable proof.
Ellie, we're no longer able to hear you. Are you still there?
Sorry, I got shut off. Sorry. I'll try it again. We're particularly concerned about the recent air quality permit for the Williams Transco Nessie compressor station, so the pipeline can be extended through New Jersey to New York. We have scientific, irrefutable proof that these compressor stations emit not only volatile compounds, methane, nitric oxide, ozone, and dangerous particulates. Your department was tasked with this permit, and I believe you said yes. Another issue that is not as life-threatening as the compressor station is gas-powered lawn equipment. These mowers and blowers emit dangerous gases. We would hope that the Air Quality Division would look into this particular problem. But I know that others have more to say. That's all I have to. And I appreciate that you're having this hearing. But our main concern is the compressor station. Thank you.
I can answer as far as status of the air compressor permit station. Yes, it was applied for. It did have a full technical review. It had a very robust public comment period, a very lengthy response to comment explanation. It did go through a full technical review and it met all the standards and requirements of the regulations. As I suggested to an early, we can't reject a permit if it meets all the standards, all the requirements, and all the rules. And in this case, the department did its thorough review and did make a final decision to issue that permit. As far as gas powered equipment, there's another group under me, which I didn't even touch on. If I had another hour, I'd be happy to talk about that one. With the NACS is the, what we call state implementation plans. And we have to do an inventory every year. Well, not every year, but every couple of years of all the sources that make up VOC emissions in the state, NOx emissions, and all these other things. Lawn equipment is accounted for in our inventory. It is a pretty small piece of the pie. I'm not saying it's not something that should be looked at. I know other states like California have done some things. It is not ripe on the vine as far as what we have the resources to tackle at the moment. But I do understand there's every little reduction counts. So I appreciate the comment.
Okay, thank you. I'm Assemblywoman Quijano, and Elizabeth, as well as Roselle, Union, and Kenilworth are in my district. So years ago, a gentleman by the name of Walter Leak contacted my office to complain about the trucks on First Street in Elizabeth. Years previous to that, Rutgers University came in and did a study on the air quality, right? So now fast forward 2017, now I'm called in, and apparently there had been a lot of frustration with the elected officials here in the city, with the state, and changing the truck route. And because you can cut through Elizabeth between 13 and 13A, apparently it does save you a few dollars as a truck driver. Now, the gentleman, Walter Leak, was interesting because he was a truck driver, right? And so I had to attend a meeting in the First Ward where First Street exists. And I was shocked at the truck population speeding through on First Street. I almost got hit myself. So we, staffer went in, we went and looked, and we were successful under the Chris Christie administration with the DOT Commissioner Hammer, who, after we sent him pictures and videos about how the neighborhood has changed from an industrial neighborhood more to a residential with senior citizen buildings and schools and a playground, which was key, the playground. So we changed it. Rutgers came back, did a study on the air quality, and it was a great test. It really did show, by moving those trucks from this residential area, that the particulates in the air has changed. So I'm here to ask for another test because the trucks are coming back. And I know this is all different departments within the state, and I will contact all the different ones. But it shows you that the community, when you come together, you can make a difference. And we had those individuals on the corners with those machines testing themselves. And that was a good indicator because they saw for themselves. My question, I wanted to share that with you, since it's a few administration ago. So my legislative aide was trying to take as many pictures. My question is on the monitoring pieces. Now, I believe that Elizabeth is very unique. We have the Port of Elizabeth, we got the airport, and now Terminal A is 100% in Elizabeth, but Newark, air moves. We have the turnpike with lots of cars and trucks, and also buses going to New York. And we have the airport. So I was happy to hear, so the upgrades at the airport. And I know trucks can back, if there's an issue at the gates at the port, or the ships are delayed, and then when they come in, then there is trucks idling. I'm sorry, there's no way to put it, because they can't get into the gate. And so is there some kind of instrument, I'll just say instrument to make it basic, at the port to tell us when the air quality is good or bad? Is there one at the airport? Because on that pink map, I was trying to pull it up, the pink map, it says something about a trailer in Elizabeth. And then you showed an actual air quality picture, but I have no clue where that's located. Sure.
It's right at the exit on 13. So if you're coming into the toll booth area,
Mm-hmm.
it's right on the right hand side there. Coming
Okay.
in from southbound to northbound.
Right. And so then I'm going to ask, not now, but I will ask in writing to know a list of everyone that has a permit in this area. We have been told that there's issues in Linden, and they were asking, and there was a whole thing about that and possible cancer issues. And so I don't know if it was an attorney looking for work or if it was really a problem. And so the thing is, Elizabeth, I believe, is very unique, and we have very unique needs. And I will follow up I'll go with the commissioner since I know him, and then he'll tell me who I have to speak to or his staff. But how do we get more instruments checking our air quality? And then how do you interface with Department of Transportation in regards to the trucks, be it in the port, on the streets? And are we also checking out-of-state commercial trucks that are driving through the state? I know there's on-the-road inspections, but do we really look at that? And on the port, we only open a little percentage of the cargo coming in. And so is there anything in the future that you may be considering to make us safer with whatever's coming into Port Elizabeth and Port Newark? I laid a lot of stuff on you. So you can, I'll give you my information. You can send it to my office, but this is just constituents are calling. They saw that there was going to be a meeting tonight. Most couldn't attend because they have other obligations at home. But they're calling and asking these questions, and I just wanted to relay. And I also want to thank you for coming. I wish the legislators got a briefing like this, because in all my years, I have never got this first class presentation that you did tonight. And so I appreciate it. I'm going to look for those slides because I have homework to do. So thank you so much.
I could provide you with a couple of quick tidbits and we can follow up in email. But the air monitoring project that's happening, our next campaign is in the summer. Elizabeth is one of the cities. When we did stakeholder engagement, we asked the community members for the areas where they, would indicate that there were issues, and we created the driving map from feedback from the community. So we can share with you that map through Elizabeth. The second thing is the Port Authority received federal funding for the Clean Ports program, and they are working with the communities to do some air monitoring. That hasn't kicked off yet. Ironbound is the lead community, but the monitoring study will be for the communities surrounding the port. So we'll be a part of that. Elizabeth could be part of that. Like I said, Ironbound was chosen to be the lead on that. As far as out-of-state trucks, there is a regulations, and motor vehicles does have a roadside team, and they can pull over and inspect any out-of-state heavy-duty trucks, and they have to meet the emission limits that the New Jersey trucks have to meet. So as far as engaging DOT, we can talk about that, and we can provide you with some information, but I just wanted to give you some little bit of tidbits now.
And real quickly, with regards to the air monitoring station at exit 13, understand that's one of our better ones. We have the most analyzers, of any other stations really there. So we're doing air toxics there. We're doing some additional particulate monitoring there. That's a little more robust than what we get in other areas. So we have a really robust station out there. So.
And if I heard you correctly, you'd like to see access to all the facilities in your community, if I heard that. That's an easy ask. You can have anybody ask us the question. You could do it through an Oprah. What I showed on What's in My Community, you can isolate a neighborhood and focus on there. It's all there. So if you want to look at them one at a time, you can use that tool. If you want to see a data dump, just ask us for it. But we are transparent.
Okay, we're going to go to the next person that has their hand up online, who is Linda Powell. So go ahead and unmute yourself and go ahead.
Good evening. My question has a couple parts. First, it's well known that the most air polluting function of compressor stations is their unscrubbed blowdowns. And I know, to follow up on Ellie Gruber's question, that the Williams Transco compressor station that they want to build in our neighborhood, which is on the border of Franklin Township and South Brunswick Township, both considered underserved communities. The blowdowns were not considered in looking at the air permit. And basically on the same page of their application, they said there were going to be 10 blowdowns a year, and right beneath that, there were 52 blowdowns a year, which is much more what usually happens from their other compressor stations in New Jersey. And I'm wondering why they are not considered, because that was how they became this project was considered a minor rather than a major facility. I personally, I've been very interested in the last 10 years of looking at the adverse health impacts, and I won't go into that now, but they are multiple, affecting every system in the human body. And I myself am very high risk for lung cancer because of my lung disease. The second part of my question has to do with the fact that a friend and neighbor of mine, and you're probably familiar with his name, Kirk Frost, had sent in some information, which I believe he got from the Neshannock station, which is also Williams Transco station, which was granted permits to expand a couple of years ago. And they changed to the two turbines that are planned for the Williams Transco compressor station 206 that I first referred to. And I believe he sent you information that of the emissions that were emitted from that station last year. These are two Mars 100 turbines. And he was told that you will not take any information other than from the applicants, meaning the fossil fuel companies, even if they're counter to scientific fact. And I'm just, wondering, this company, Williams, is one, I think, the major fossil fuel company in the country. I'm not sure about the world. And I'm just wondering why you won't look at the facts, but you'll just take it from fossil fuel companies who are in it for the profit.
Thanks so much for your questions, Linda. I think the way that I want to frame that for the panel is, how might the DEP take into consideration air pollution data from sources outside of applicants? So it could come from a community source. Maybe they have community science or another entity. How might the DEP consider that? And is there an opportunity for the public to transmit that data to DEP for consideration?
That's very good. That interprets the second part of the question. The first part of the question is, why aren't all the emissions being considered in granting air permits? Because they're not.
When we're doing an air permit review, we certainly look at the contents of the application, what's in it, what manufacturer specifications are, control technology. We look up in multiple databases. One in particular is called the RBLC, Rack Back Layer Clearinghouse. It's a lot of acronyms, but there's a lot of data in there. We do not rely on the applicant's application alone. We look at a lot of other resources. We run our own analysis. We double check emission factors and whatnot. To just quickly touch on the first question, we evaluate significant sources. And I think I touched on that in the presentation. There's insignificant sources, there's exempt sources, and further, a lot of these blowdown events are off-site. They're not even at the site, so it's not even part of the facility. But I'd be happy to talk offline on that subject too.
And I do just want to make a note about the NESI compressor station, because I do know that we've gotten at least 2 comments and questions by now, and there are a couple more comments and questions in the chat about it. Those comments and questions all seem to be a little bit related. And so I do want to make sure that we're prioritizing time to get and hear from other comments and questions, especially in the room and online. So if you have a question that is outside of NESI, we really would like to hear it and make sure that we're leaving some good time for you to ask your question. If you do have an additional question about NESI, we're happy to speak with you offline, but I want to make sure that with the time we have remaining, that we can get some other questions and comments in. So I'll take the next person in the room. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I do work in Elizabeth, but we live in Monroe, and one of our favorite places to go is Island Beach State Park. I think a very underestimated issue is a particulate matter from wood burning fires, stoves, etc. We experience at our home. We've tried to get resolution there with no resolution. Now at Island Beach State Park, we go down in a no fire zone. They make fires. We've called that helpline and the police don't come and do anything. So my husband has asthma. So what we feel we don't have any rights. At the beach, we park in a no fire zone. We called the helpline and they kind of went after us for doing that. We became the bad guys because we were calling. At home, we called, at home, we called about fire permits. Our neighbor had wood over 3/4 of their property burning. Not burning, but to burn. So when somebody's burning.
And who are you calling? Who are you calling?
That one was the,
I've called the fire marshal, okay, NJDEP, okay. The New Jersey Forest Service came out, inspectors came out. I called the Middlesex County Health Department came out. I spent 8 months in the city council meetings with the mayor and the council. They did nothing, okay. They even posted something on the website about me, that I have asthma. I mean, I've been living with the disease for 40 years, okay? And wood smoke is extremely toxic. I mean, you guys have articles about it all over the place. And the state of New Jersey allows fire pits. Has become a big thing. Everybody has fire pits, but nobody monitors it, okay? And the smoke, and I live in a really close area. I've had these neighbors move in, okay? And the houses are very close. And I can't live in my house, okay? At one point, the smoke was coming to my house. It's all my property. I didn't know what to do. I reached out to everybody. And the same thing on the beach. And nobody does anything about it, you know? And well, I belong to the New Jersey Beach Buggy Association, okay? And we've done a lot of work, charity work down there. Okay, and guys have been talking about the permit systems and so forth. And I've been going down there for 30 years and I've never seen anything in my entire life. There's no enforcement.
But our focus is the fires. If we're in a no fire zone, we just don't want to fire.
Enforcement is not there, okay? If there was enforcement, if people were doing their job, then there wouldn't be a problem, okay? But they don't, their permits aren't removed. They are allowed to stay on the beach and nothing's happened. So we're kind of like lost in what to do. You know, we pay taxes and everything else. And, you know, what am I supposed to do? That's why I'm here. I've reached out to all different sources, okay, trying to resolve the problems. I mean, luckily we didn't have too many problems last year and so forth. They kind of cleared up, but I don't know what's going to happen this year. and so forth, you know. And the place down there at the beach has become very popular. And people have no respect for the
I
park.
think more of the point is we can't call that helpline because
Yeah, we can.
we were targeted because
We get targeted.
they just assumed it was us because we had sent some emails. So that helpline doesn't help us. So,
Oh, and also talk about asthma. I came down from my neighbor, I came down with pneumonia, okay? And I had to go in the hospital for 5 days, okay? And I'm luckily they caught what was in my lungs, that the antibiotics worked. But my other neighbor, he came down with pneumonia. He went into the hospital. He got COVID. He's gone,
all right.
you know?
So
So,
that's our flight.
you know, I don't know what to do.
Firstly, I'm so sorry for your loss. And do you mind sharing your name just in case we need to follow up? It'll be good to know who we're speaking with.
Your name?
Yeah, your names.
My name's Randy Dye.
Okay, Randy and
Sharon Griesheimer.
Sharon.
Griesheimer.
Okay.
He works in medical, so, you know, we know all about medical.
Thank you. Wondering if the panel has a response to how the DEP might regulate wood fire and fire pits in general, or
So
enforce them. Yeah.
fire pits on residential property, DEP does not regulate. From an air pollution enforcement standpoint, the Air Pollution Control Act, our statute, strictly prohibits us from entering residential property. We don't regulate residential property. Most times when you have fires that are occurring in a township, townships have ordinances, or your local health department has ordinances about that under the Public Health Nuisance Code. But our subchapter 2 for prohibition of open burning, my inspectors, we can't go on if he's burning, I can't go on his property and do anything about it. There is one other aspect is that the Forest Fire Service, they issue
Permit.
permits, correct?
It's good for 30 days,
Correct.
okay? Mhm.
No, go ahead.
You know, I know all about that, you know,
Mhm.
we've been down that road and everything else. And like I said, I reached out to every place where I can
Mhm.
before, you know, this situation, and nobody wanted to help me, you know, like, what am I supposed to do?
So I
Police,
believe
they can.
I
It's a
believe
nuisance. I was ready to file a lawsuit, okay? Take it to court, take him to court.
you're talking about a neighbor?
The neighbor, yeah.
Okay.
The neighbor. Because this guy loved fires. I've never seen anything like my entire life. He loved the smoke and he loved fires. So how are you supposed to deal with that?
So if he has a permit issued by the Forest Fire Service to burn on his, you have a campfire permit or a ceremonial permit, Forest Fire, they enforce their permit and they can remove that permit. But I'm not 100% familiar with all of the nuances of how Forest Fire does it and, when they inspect. What town did you say you live in?
I live in Jamesburg.
That's what
Unfortunately, our
county?
neighbor, he was on the far, he was awarded, so.
He's passed away, so, you know, yeah.
That,
The things kind of settled with that. But my other concern is about the beach. The same thing about the beach. I tried to follow up with this. I sat with the director, Jennifer Clayton, Charlie Walsh, president at the time was Beach Buggy Association, myself, the sergeant down there that monitors the police and everything else. And we went over all this about the issue. You know, and nothing was ever done.
so.
Do you
And
have
it's
anything?
become like,
My only suggestion for the panel is that we would have to get Division of Forest and Forestry involved to address these issues at the park and whether Forest Fire is adequately enforcing their permits.
That's right. So thank you so much, Randy and Sharon, for sharing your concern. We will definitely follow up with our colleagues within Forest Fire Service. Thank you. Okay, so we have Thomas Dowling. You're next up online, so feel free to go ahead.
What is done for monitoring and mitigation during a cleanup project in general?
Thomas, it's a little bit, Thomas, it's difficult to make out what you're saying. You sound a little bit muffled. If you can.
Any better? Any better?
Keep trying. A little bit better. Keep going.
Okay, I probably get closer to the mic. Okay, so
Okay.
in this area, Middlesex, Union County, we've got some massive cleanup and mitigation projects from Cornell Dubelier, which is mostly stream contamination from PCBs. What is done to monitor and mitigate any particulates, dust containing these contaminants? How do we track them and determine whether they're getting airborne or going out of the site?
Thomas, if I understand your question correctly, because I think you were a little bit muffled, you're talking about the EPA Superfund cleanup in the Piscataway region from I forget, it's electronics company,
Right.
where they've cleaned a lot of the trees up and the brush, and they'll be taking up the dirt that is contaminated, putting back clean dirt, and then replanting the trees. And your question is, if during that construction there's dust, what's happening to keep that dust on the ground so it's not kicking up any of the contaminants that you might breathe them? Is that correct?
Correct. How are we checking to see if any of the contaminants are becoming airborne and what can be done about them?
Okay. Yeah, no, thank you. And this is something that actually Senator Deignan had reached out about this, because I think it's fairly stark that that site had been wooded for so long. Oftentimes the Superfund sites don't get cleaned up and a lot of growth happens. And so the first step is to cut the growth back before you can do the cleanup. And people that have grown used to seeing the forest, it's shocking to look at. And I think you raise a really good question, is how do you keep the contaminants in place so that they can be properly disposed of? And I need to get back to you on the specifics, but my understanding during these construction activities is they have spraying trucks, which are part of dust control, which are, while they're doing, any of the groundwork, et cetera, they're wetting the surface as well as keeping the dirt that's there from leaving under the soil district control measures, which are basically like a rock area on the property so that it gets it out of the tires before it leaves. But I can get you from the EPA more specifics on exactly what their plans are. I'm sure it's very clear in the specs and publicly available what the contractor is required to do. If they're not following those protocols, that's another issue. And then we would need to work with the EPA to make sure they're monitoring that they're properly following protocol to keep the community safe. That's critically important. I don't know if other folks have additions into that.
In general, when you had these, I'll call them dusty operations, the most viable option is dust suppression through water, either through misters or flat out spraying like you'll see them from a fire hose. Keep it wet. It doesn't fly. So that is the most viable practice that does occur at these dusty sites.
I'll just add too
that the technology, for example, what monitoring device might be in that enclosure at that site?
Did you ask if there was monitoring technology deployed at the site?
So I have a photo of one of the enclosures for some sort of monitoring technology. I'm somewhat curious as to what type of technology is being used there.
I'm not sure because it's an EPA cleanup. It's under their purview, so I'm not as familiar with it, but we can look into if they are doing monitoring, and it is very possible they are. It's not uncommon. For example, we have a cleanup that we're doing in Liberty State Park, and there's some monitoring happening there. There's some work that we're doing in Newark for the Essex Hudson, also known as the Greenway Project. We're also doing monitoring there. And then I also mentioned too that it's possible that there is some dust of cutting a tree down that might not also be contaminated, but could just be a nuisance. And so, I think each step of the protocol for the decontamination would match where someone could be susceptible to coming in contact with a human pathway to contamination. So things could change along with the process of the cleanup as well. So I can follow up more with the specifics, at least get you the documents, because if you live in the community, I know it's been visually noticeable, and it's going to go on for some time. This isn't a 1-year thing. This is probably a 5+ year operation as they move through the different segments. So thank you, Thomas. We'll definitely get back to you on that. I'm assuming we have his contact info in some way.
Yeah. Thomas, please make sure you leave your contact information in the chat. We'll follow up, but I think Ron or Anthony, go ahead.
Yeah, so Candace just shared with me a picture of what looks like a high volume air sampler. So they're pulling a filter sample, if that's from that site, which they can then analyze for both particulate matter and possibly even speciation, meaning they can determine what that dust is made of. So again, that's without speaking to EPA or knowing, exactly what they're doing. That would be my speculation as to what that is.
This person in the room, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Lois Kraus. I'm a lifelong resident of Union County, and I have a couple comments and possibly a question as well. So because we were just talking about dust, I believe you had mentioned that odor and dust really was not part of the purview. And I would ask you to consider construction dust, in particular, the cutting of plastic-based, whether it's PVC pipe, Trek decking, hardy board, that releases, there's actually a preliminary study happening in one of our universities right now that if you cut one PVC pipe, it generates over 1 trillion micro or nanoparticles, which are going into the atmosphere. So we know what they are. They are, if they're not contained, then they are going into our air, into our water, into our soil. And we know around here that from a Rutgers study, 6% of our soil is plastic. So when you say it shouldn't count, I would ask that we consider it. And I believe there are some bills in the assembly around construction containment to make it, whether it's through hoods or tents or tarps, to contain our construction and to have that. So that's a comment. The second comment related to what Ellie Gruber said, I appreciate that two-stroke equipment is a small part. I believe a couple of years ago, your department said it was about 3% of our NOx, SOx emissions. But unlike the great work you're doing with diesel and gasoline and your testing emissions, we're not testing the emissions. These two-stroke are just spewing out a lot of particulate. I'm sure you know it's half hour of a leaf blower is 1,300 miles of an SUV. And dollar for dollar, even if we could put a couple $1 million in a Reggie fund to get them out of the fields, it would be a cheap trade-off. It's not anywhere near like replacing buses. That's what Minnesota did, and it was very effective at reducing even a little bit. And then my last comment is I'm eagerly awaiting, I love the food composting bill that's coming. I'm waiting for DEP to release county guidance so that Union County can get moving on getting food compost to those last 5 miles, because our town is trying to do it. Once food is out, I believe the vast majority of what will be left is packaging. And packaging, right here in Elizabeth, we're between these two. It used to be Covanta, Real World. I don't know what they call it now. We're between Rahway and Newark. There is all this plastic being burned, and it is so polluting. So how do we help people here reduce plastic packaging, reduce that, make sure what can be recycled gets recycled? Thank you.
I can't answer that last question, but I just want to make sure I didn't misstate anything. When I said dust and odor are not, what I'm saying is they're not specific pollutants. They could be anything and everything. It could be soil. It could be something you're smelling in the air that doesn't have an issue. We have a very good handle on a known pollutant. It gets much trickier when it's a dust of an unknown source or an odor of an unknown source, how do we address that? So we do address them. We do it, and particularly dust with the particulate. We have 3 standards for particulate: PM10, which is almost a particle you could see; PM 2.5, and anything that's called TSP, total suspended particulate, anything that can get hung up in the air. So we do have standards, and keep in mind we are dealing with permitted sources. I appreciate your comments about the construction. We don't regulate construction. So we'd probably have to work with our counterparts in some other departments to maybe tackle that one. Right now, as far as lawn equipment, I've seen a lot of success with certain towns tackling this through a noise issue. And I have seen them kind of tackling the lawn equipment from a noise issue where they have noise ordinances, and the electric equipment tends to be quieter. But that is a challenge also.
That there are a couple of municipalities that do ban gasoline, like leaf blowers, during the ozone season.
Year round, and 6 that are seasonal.
During
But
ozone season.
What I'm asking for is that the DEP help because the landscapers are pushing back, they can't afford it. And now that gas prices are high, this is a perfect opportunity to throw somebody their way to trade it in, to get this dirty, antiquated equipment out of our environments. And it's dollar for dollar versus a bus versus a truck. You're going to make such an impact. I know it's small, and think of the landscapers that's a social justice issue. The health impacts, the environmental impact, it would be just powerful dollars spent. Small dollars. Thank you.
Thank you, Lois. We will go to Ken Dolsky. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'll be brief. I was going to talk about Nessie, but I understand the issues. So I'll just say this as kind of an overall thought regarding this. And Ken Ratzman, we've been down this road before on permits that we know are bad for bad projects. I think on a couple of power plants that were trying to be built up in the Bergen County area before, and we've been, I understand the issues. I just want to point out the total insanity of accepting the fact that climate is an existential threat. Existential means we die. Okay, it's an existential threat, yet we are accepting permits that will make the problem worse because that's what we do. And so I understand the difficulties of pushing back on that, and you have to live with what you've got. But I think it's time that we'd like to see the DEP. So Ed, this is your challenge to stand up and push back on, to the legislature and to the governor and say, this is what we're forced to do. We are forced to hurt the people of New Jersey. We're forced to cause additional air pollution. We're forced to cause additional cancers, and we're forced to accept more greenhouse gas, even though we have the Global Warming Response Act, which says we need to cut this by 80% in 30 to 25 years, which is a total joke. But we're forced to do this because that's the way things work right now. And that is not acceptable. It's not acceptable for anybody in this state to say, let's just go with that because that's the way it is. So I would ask you to maybe be the first commissioner in history to push back on this and to fix the problem. And I think we need to address things like the open burning of wood fires. And I agree with Lois 1,000%. We have absolutely got to do something about leaf blowers and on all these small gasoline engines that are blowing pollution all around our homes, during the summer. So let's do something about it and not just accept it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. And Yeah, please, Talani, go ahead. I was just gonna say, do we have anybody else in the room? Go ahead.
Hello, good evening. My name's Tolani. I work as the Zero Emissions and Warehouse Organizer for Clean Water Action. We're also based here in Elizabeth. And a concern, especially here in Elizabeth, is just the high concentration of warehouses. We also have the Port of Elizabeth, Port of Newark, and that attracts a lot of diesel trucks, making, air quality really bad here. So one of the things that stuck out to me in the presentation today was talking about some of the on-road mobile source programs and a little bit about like air compliance and enforcement. So I'm just wondering if DEP, if there's any interaction with warehouse facilities, with ports, especially communities, overburdened communities that are close to those facilities, because that is essentially is the culprit of a lot of the air pollution and causing a lot of health impacts for some of those communities. So just wanted to know if y'all could elaborate more on that and if warehouses and port facilities aren't considered or there is an interaction, would you consider in the near future for those programs? Thank you.
So we know that there's a lot of trucks, obviously, going to and from the ports and around the communities. With that, there's a lot of warehouses. What we're doing with the mobile sources is trying to incentivize people to turn over their vehicles and to go from diesel to electric. And we're providing a lot of grant funds to do that. The Port Authority also received, I think, close to $500 million to clean up and to transition a lot of the equipment to zero emission equipment. And part of that big award is for trucks, to replace the trucks. So I think, slowly we're trying to get at those trucks. We're not going to do away with them, but if we can move them to a cleaner option, that's what we're hoping to do. We have a large project that we received funding for, the Clean Corridor project, where we're working with other states to install medium and heavy duty charging depots. And that will be to help incentivize that fleet turnover. So when you have the charging stations and you have those trucks that are, driving along I-95 and they know that they have a place to charge in neighboring states along their route, that will hopefully help incentivize people to move to electric. And like I said, there's a lot of financial incentives for people to do that, to cut down the cost of an electric truck, to make it more viable, to be the same price of a diesel truck.
Okay, Rachel Dawn Davis, you're up next online.
Yes, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Just making sure. Okay,
Yes.
great. Okay, so I'm Rachel Dawn Davis. I'm representing Water Spirit, which is a spiritual ecology nonprofit serving the state through programming and advocacy centered on water as the source and sustainer of all life for almost 30 years. And obviously, air and water are clearly intertwined. With respect to air monitoring, starting really 16 years ago, I grew a background of community health and preventative policy making focused on air monitoring through something called FLIR cameras, monitoring methane and really what is ground zero for fracking in Dimock, Pennsylvania, near where I grew up spending summers. So more recently, of course, in the past several years, other locations that are, experiencing environmental racism and all these, terrible water intensive industries that are popping up throughout the country. Back when there was a federal environmental justice effort, there are a lot of community owned attempts, so at least there had been projects going on. So sort of devastated by the stories of those living in and near related infrastructure, I really continue to seek ways to empower the community. Studies are there for all of those on the panel. You can read and synthesize them. The Environmental Health News Network has a report called The Body Burden of Fracking, where they study over 12 years of data demonstrating both ends of life, young and old, are dying early and experiencing terrible diseases from these emissions. So with respect to DEP monitoring, it was shared Kirk, who's a resident and has been Kirk Frost, who's been a outspoken person and frankly, citizen scientist, community member that we have. It's a huge asset that we have him with respect to air monitoring for many years. And I'll echo what many have said before. There's no accountability and no enforcement. Many moons ago, I did help get the Global Warming Response Act passed as a very fresh, graduate of Rutgers. But I still hear about the enforcement of the 70s and where is it? So I just wanted to share what Kirk said, that permits are consistently underestimated. And because there's no real-time monitoring, enforcement is limited to whatever the facility operator chooses to report. So there are the beginnings, Kirk and several others have worked to coordinate air monitoring initiatives, like I was saying, is happening across the country. In 3 towns, Princeton, South Brunswick, and Franklin Township, 3 counties, Mercer, Middlesex, and Somerset, and others specifically in Princeton, the Princeton mayor, and of course, South Brunswick and Franklin Township mayors are interested, but real monitoring methane and other combustion-related pollutants would finally give our communities, 1, actual data, not anecdotal reports of odors, 2, the ability to issue alerts to residents, just as towns do for downed trees, boiled water notices, or other hazards, 3, evidence to push back on harmful emission spikes from CS206 or nearby diesel backup data centers. Whatever number I'm on is the final one, a basis to demand accountability from DEP, which really does not respond meaningfully to complaints right now. There are 2 monitors, QNAC Air and AeroQual AQM65, that can measure methane and other gas pollutants associated with, for instance, compressor station operations. They're currently in use in Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, Wyoming, and of course, Purple Air is useful, but for limited purposes. So just wanted to share that all because the data is out there. And so as was said, I don't know if it was by Ken or somebody else, but this is making the DEP look like it's not doing its job. If we're just continuing to see DEP allowing these things happening and saying things like, oh, it's only going to emit here and that won't, the wind blows. And there's so much over a decade more, maybe 2, of evidence that this is no bueno, not good. So if we can work with you to, again, go back to that clarion call I hear about the enforcement of the 70s, where is the enforcement when these things are actually not being adhered to? And where is the emphasis on citizen science, which is definitely available and I would say abundant in New Jersey, but really not being given its credence?
Thank you so much, Rachel, and we'll definitely follow up with you all offline because there were a number of points in what you said. We want to make sure that we hit on all of them, but a few that stood out to me, you were talking about specific technology to measure methane, and maybe there's a assumption that the DEP doesn't measure methane. Does the panel have a response to any of that?
So we're not required to meet any kind of national ambient air quality standards. And so that's not a part of our monitoring network. You did mention the FLIR cameras. I'm not certain that you can quantify methane with those, but they will show you leaks. So that would be something that's more facility specific.
From a facility specific perspective, as far as monitoring, there are certain facilities such as landfills that do have to monitor for methane specifically. It's a unique challenge at landfills. Methane is one of those come along for the ride pollutants. There's probably in those cases a lot of other things we are monitoring for. Someone brought up ReWorld earlier. There's a certain amount of pollutants that are continuously monitored on a minute-to-minute, second-to-second basis. There are other pollutants at that same facility that are monitored by stack test once a year. There are other ways we also analyze that facility by doing, as I said, surrogate monitors. Are they running the equipment at the right temperature? Are they running it at the right flow rates? So it's a smorgasbord of monitoring at a specific facility for different areas.
Melissa, maybe you can touch on how the DEP utilizes or how it might utilize citizen science, maybe from the community air projects that we partner with communities on, how that data is collected and then utilized by the DEP.
I think the best thing would be for the community to share that with us again, and it all depends on how that information is being collected. And we could look to see what's around the area. How does that compare to the regulatory monitors? But, citizen science projects, and efforts are really good to identify, areas that we might have to look at, but they're not at the same robust nature as our regulatory monitors. But, information that you could share with us is always something that we could look into.
Okay, and I believe the last questions that we have online. I'll take you after. Okay, is from Anise McRae. Anise is putting into the chat, I think 2 questions. One is there anyone to contact in Trenton concerning toxic chemical smoke odors from pipes connected to housing beneath a senior high-rise building emitting smoke polluting apartments causing a health hazard? I have an indoor air quality machine. And are there any air monitoring for the inner city locations within Trenton? So I think, Anise, if you were able to provide us an address for the senior high-rise building that you're referring to, that would be really helpful for us to follow up and look into it. But posing this to the panel, just talking about air monitoring within Trenton. Like, do we have an air monitor in the Trenton area? Yeah.
Yes, we do. Again, a regulatory monitor. A few years back, we ran a purple air sensor project in Trenton that gave us quite a bit of data, quite a bit of, pointing us in the right direction of, sort of what's in Trenton using those sensors. But by and large, if it's an indoor air quality issue, that's not something that we would specifically monitor for directly in people's homes. You can contact local health departments. They may be able to help with something like that. But it's not something that the Bureau of Air Monitoring necessarily has the equipment for. All right.
My name, and thank you definitely for having this. I really appreciate it. And it was thorough as what was shared earlier. And thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Alterice Frazier. And I'm the Northeast Port Campaigner for Pacific Environment, international national organization focused on climate control and definitely with a strong focus on maritime. And one of the things that was highlighted, but they're thoroughly not engaged, and that's the emissions and the pollution coming from our ports from the ships. We talked about the idling that the trucks have, and we understand the emissions, obviously, and the advocacy around the trucks, yet the port's own data shows that their emission input largely is from the idling and the shipping. Close to 36% of their pollution is coming from ships. And obviously in our communities like Elizabeth, North, Jersey City, Bayonne, Bayonne probably more because they got the cruises, but we don't really get to see these ships. We see the airplanes, we see the trucks, and advocacy is strong in those directions, yet I'm truly aiming to understand how the department is focusing with, as you share some of the information in regards to the port and working with them, obviously with the CCC grant and really receiving that money. But obviously getting the money is one thing, actually moving and action items is really where we need to be at. The science is proven, the technology is understood, resources, as you share, $500 million was given. But once again, we're talking about almost 18 months ago, and we need to move. As the gentleman said, this is life and death. I'm blessed to be, hopefully, in May 23rd, to be 50 years old. But I've been living in Newark and Elizabeth all my life, and I'm blessed to not have some of the things that I know from other community friends, residents, and family members when we talk about asthma, when we talk about heart diseases. So I'm asking, truly, and from where you guys sit at the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, what's some true actionable information that you can share that's really tangible and measurable, that's really happening in your relationship with the Port Authority. We're not adversarial. I engage them thoroughly. I just had a meeting earlier today, consistently at the port meeting. So it's not adversarial as much as it's still got to move, and we can't let the politics and the bureaucracy all continue to be in our way. And one of the things, as we were sharing about the port, yes, their focus is scope 1 and 2 and on the things that they could control, yet their scope 3 focusing on the ships that come in is last, yet it's the most effective thing that's polluting us. So really understanding how we focus on those tenants, because they're not able to, from their understanding, to do but so much based on the tenants that's there. So if the tenants are there, but the Port Authority as landlords could do but so much, where's the state coming in? Because at the end of the day, these tenants receive resources coming from ships across the world, Europe and other places. So how are we making sure industry is still playing the game the right way? Because idling at the ports for 3 and 4 weeks, and we're talking about the calls that come to the port, we're talking about thousands of ships over a year. So I'm truly really, if we could get that type of information of where we really are moving with the ports when we talk about the shipping side of this air quality and this pollution that unfortunately our state and definitely the port side communities are continuously to receive.
So ship idling is, it's a big issue to tackle, and I've been involved in a lot of conversations with the port over probably the last decade or so. I know the communities were very interested at one time about the bonnet that goes over top of the exhaust, but that has proved not necessarily, it's very expensive. And it really doesn't do, what it's supposed to do. It's not as effective. The problem with the ships are you have ships that call upon the port, but they're not always the same ships. And sometimes they don't come back. And we don't regulate that. I know for some time, it's escaping me. I think it's the IMO or the International Maritime. They were supposed to come out with some guidance this past year, and they delayed that. Yeah, so unfortunately, that's difficult. Shore power.
West Coast, California, from China, from Korea, and even the EU is focusing on shore power and that as a solution. Yet here we understand our wharves and our berths are so old, the element is expensive, yet we still need to understand how to get to where the world is going. To your point, some of them, the ships that are not 100% obviously, but there is a large 30% are, but have the ability, but they can't plug in, or they can't. They don't have the capacity here at the port. So those companies do have capacity in their fleet, but obviously they're not going to send those because they're not able to engage.
Yeah, I think it also depends on like the ports out west. Sometimes bring different things, right? So we have a lot of bulk ships that come here. And so there are different types of ships that call on the different ports. Shore power, the other issue is where do you put those, the plugs? And, because every ship is equipped with the plugs in a different place. So that is logistically more difficult. So it is, something that the Port Authority has thought about and worked on. They have a couple initiatives where, their speed is slowed down once they come to certain areas and they did see some reduction there.
Therese, I'm so sorry. Do you mind just grabbing the mic? Yeah, so people online can hear you.
No, so to your point, all of that information is understood, yet how, from your angle though, how do we help you? One point I heard you share that, obviously funding can support, but also like I was sharing, the port can't do but so much with the tenants. So even as they get to scope 3 and it's time to push towards the zero emissions we all aiming to get to by 2050, they can't do but so much. As they're sharing, is where can the state come in and help support these businesses who are in our state who are a part of these emissions coming in, where's that type of leverage and support from the state?
Yeah,
If
so-
it is, or is it even a thinking?
Yeah, so we don't have a whole lot of, interaction with those big ships. I know the Port Authority plays a big part in what's happening with the IMO. And I think they were really hoping that what they were going to come out with would help a lot with the emissions. When we work with Marine, we work with, the ferries, the high-speed ferries, that are transporting people back and forth, or we could do with the marine vessels. We deal with the small.
The ocean going vessels is not a
That-
part.
No, that's not, because that's regulated by the feds and something different.
Okay.
Good evening. I'd like to thank you guys for your time today and for your presentation. My name is Gina Ramos. I am part of the Latino Action Network Foundation. And my question revolves around the challenges we're facing monitoring data sensors. So we're monitoring the energy generators itself, but not the data centers. So how does the agency plan on accounting for the impact on air quality itself overall? Right? And then what degradation of air quality would have to be met in order for the agency to step up? And if it does get to that point, what would it look like if the agency were to step up and take some, maybe give these data centers some type of consequence? Would it just be like fees, or would they have to almost kind of like reconstruct their system in order to be more environmentally friendly, kind of like they're doing with the trucks, right? They have to be 2014 or newer. Their engines have to be more environmentally friendly as far as how they emit their emissions.
Yeah, so I touched on data centers in my presentation as being a particularly challenging industry. We all know they're high energy demand, and they can't be turned off. If there was a power outage, they have to come up with their own energy. I'm not going to touch on all the legislation that's out there, but there's a lot of ideas and a lot of thoughts out there. But there are options for data centers. They can pull off the grid and have backup energy through emergency generators. They have to pass risk. They have to get a permit. They have to go through all the hoops and hurdles that you would to get a permit. And the testing and maintenance alone for some of these facilities, even if they never operate in emergency status, can be problematic. So it is something we're clearly evaluating. There are other options for data centers if they want to think about it. There's fuel cells. There are other technologies for energy. Can you supplement a battery with something else? The challenge we have as permit evaluators is we review what's before us. We, at this point in time, don't dictate how they generate their power or how they generate their backup power. But if they're going to be asking to burning fossil fuel in any way, shape, or form, it will need an air permit. It will get evaluated. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but that's at least from.
If they do need an air permit, there will be a hearing associated with it. So an opportunity for public to comment and to share ideas that the public has about what should be included as conditions in those permits.
I see. To clarify my question, I understand that the permit comes from as far as their energy generators, right? But after it's all been said and done and they're taken into action and they've been standing for a while, how will the agency quantify the impact they've been having on our air quality? And if it does get to a concerning level, what will happen? Because shutting it down, this seems like a very big thing to kind of just turn off the lights.
And I look at them as another industry. This is where all of us being up here is kind of important. I may issue a permit to an individual facility, and I may issue another permit, and I may issue another permit. Your concern is, well, where does it become problematic from an air monitoring perspective? When do we start seeing that? And that's why we have Anthony and his crew keeping an eye on the monitoring network. we're trying to reduce elsewhere. So it's a balancing act. And if the sources get large enough, and I don't think any of them would, I hope, we could do multi-source modeling. The facility could do multi-source modeling if they become a large enough facility. But I understand the question. It's another industry with another set of challenges.
Thank you so much.
I just wanted to add that my office is, we're undergoing a project right now to try to identify unknown data centers to us because they're sprouting up with irregularity that if they don't come before Ken and voluntarily say, here's my permit, they can install the facility, they could have it. And we've come across some that are not permitted. So we're looking at different resources for identifying all of the data centers that I can in my territory. And what I found is that the data for the data centers is spread out. You could Google it and you can have some websites that have, they list 40 data centers and one lists 20 data centers. Some of them overlap, some of them don't. So we're trying to, and this is a project that we're collaborating with EPA on for identifying data centers and trying to identify all of them. And you'll see in the news that there's municipality that's opposed to a data center here and there, and it's being addressed on a local level somewhat. But as long as they come in and meet the requirements that Ken's group has, they probably will be permitted. And then once the permit is issued, in my office, we enforce what the permit says. So we make sure that they're under their hours of operation, that they're burning the fuel under the limit that we set for them, so that they're not having an impact beyond what the permit allows them to do.
Thank you.
I just want to do a quick time check at this point. We covered a lot of good ground tonight, but we are limited on time. So I'm going to give Catherine Tokel the last word online. So feel free to unmute yourself and you'll get the last word, and then we'll wrap up with some closing remarks.
Hi, thank you. Yes, my name is Catherine. I'm a student graduating at Kane University, and it's off like Elizabeth Hillside, like Union location. My question is about the idling. You said it's about 3 minutes for idling. Come to Kane, please, because if you want to see idling all day, Kane University is a spot. It's a great university. No, I don't mean to kid in that way, but no, it's a great university though. But there's so much idling that occurs at Kane. It's kind of ridiculous, to be honest. Across the street from Kane, they put like brand new hotels and all that. It's great. It's a beautiful location to be at. It's like mini Manhattan. But I would really want to persuade you guys to come to Kane and like help the idling situation, just because like we have students that are like, travel from like maybe out of state, out of the country, from China, from Skylands, all these other locations. And we kind of need like some sort of help, I think, with that idling situation and how to help Morris Avenue like less congested and kind of help like that area, like that Hillside Union area, because we have so many professors to mentors to teachers, students that maybe fly to come to Kane or just to kind of drive to Kane. So is there any sort of maybe plans in the future that can help that idling, or maybe more like street things, something like that? My minor is environmental science, my major is liberal arts, but I would try to persuade you guys and try to like help this idling, because you stated in your PowerPoint today about 3 minutes cars should be idling. I have sat at traffic lights, leaving campus, coming to campus, going for different classes, and I probably sat for over 3 minutes, maybe about 45 minutes. So people have different vehicles. Not everyone in that town, unfortunately, is able to afford maybe a better vehicle per se, that type of thing. We have students that drive older vehicles, modern vehicles, maybe some Teslas, but I think you need some sort of help in the community towns for the poor neighborhoods, because there's a bunch of people in the poor towns, respectfully, that would like to maybe level up in their lives to get to a better location if it's jobs or other things that are concerned. So my advice to you would be, how would you help myself, that I'm 24 years old, and other students that are starting off college, how to help them with parking and the idling situations?
Well, one thing I can address is going to Kane. We are looking for areas and ways to expand our Wait Clean outreach. So going to Kane sounds like a great idea to work on spreading the message. Like you said, a lot of people might not realize that they're not supposed to be idling. and what the consequences of idling are. So I will definitely take that back to my team for consideration for outreach. And then the survey that I put the QR code for that Candace will send out afterwards. We actually have a question in there about idling and where do you see idling in your neighborhood and in your community so that we can look to see where the idling is occurring and see what we can do to maybe target some enforcement in those areas and things like that. But I'll let Larry address that part.
Thanks, Robin. You nailed it. Call the hotline because, yeah, I know Kane University, but what time of the day do I go? Right? There's only 4 inspectors in the entire state for idling and tampering. 4. So I need to be able to say, no, you're going to go here today. And therefore, if I go to Kane, Cape May is not going to be covered. You know, all the other places that you guys are calling, Elizabeth's not going to be covered. So I need information. So if you're at Kane and distribute to your friends, tell them to call the hotline. And here's the beauty of our law, which is very different. When I find somebody who is idling and exceeded the legal law requirement over 3 minutes, the owner or operator of the vehicle will get a ticket. Also, in this case, if it's on Kane's property, Kane University is going to get a ticket. So that day, if I write 10 tickets for different owners of the vehicle, Kane University get a 10 times that penalty. First offense, $250. Probably for them, cheap. Second offense for the university could be a different car. The second, $500. Cheap. Third offense, $750. Fourth and further offense is $1,000 per vehicle per day. Kane has money, I'll take it. If I have to park my time every day at Kane, sure, I'll do it. I'm not picking on Kane, it's just an example, right? Because that's what we're talking about. So key is I need information so that we can smartly put where we need to be. And they'll get the message. And Kane will be the one helping us to police their students like, hey, we're $1,000 now per vehicle per day. We can do that. So they should police themselves. That's the idea with Wawas and all that. We go to Wawa. Wawa gets the ticket too. It's not just you and me. Wawa gets the ticket and so forth and so on. So it's very unique.
I apologize for interrupting. Sorry. The other thing is too that Kane has free parking. Before I started from Kane, I went to community college, and most community colleges I went to in Union, we had to pay for parking. Like if you ever entered the campus or anything and you didn't have a permit, $60 is the permit. They would kick you off the campus. There's been some situations where Kane would literally park their vehicles from like out of state, and I'm like, you're not in a parking spot. You're parked your car on top of our grass. Like, are you kidding me? Like this is crazy. So it's kind of pathetic that community colleges have permit parking in place, but Kane University is a great university. I love it. It's a great university, great for education, great for business, anything like that. But you know, I mean, the facts are the facts. I mean, Kane needs to have some sort of help, and we need Elizabeth to help us. We need Hillside, we need Union, because it borders all those towns. So, and we need the DEP to help with the environmental things with those types of laws in place. I mean, that's why we have laws, I'm assuming. We have laws, we have things that need to be in place, and I expect the higher authority teams to maybe follow up with those things. So, Kane is free parking. Anyone could come to Kane. I mean, we have people that come to Kane that don't even have IDs, respectfully. So, I love Kane. It's a great university, but we need more help than just, I think, what's been provided. And we need the DEP for their protection to help us make sure that our lawns are safe, make sure everything's in place, but make sure that we have traffic patrol, all this type of stuff enforced. So I don't know what else to say, but yeah.
So I just want to say one last thing to build upon what Robin said. We have partnered with other universities. I think last year we did with Rutgers. So if Kane has an event for students, we can always come and do some outreach we bring a table, we have a lot of stuff that we can give away to remind people, but we can also educate people and talk to the students to let them know that it is illegal to idle. And so we can spread that awareness and educate them about what the rules are. So it's always great to partner when there's a larger event that draws a lot of people, because then we can, educate people and do that outreach at one time.
So just as we wrap up here, I just want to thank all of the panelists, the folks from the Department of Environmental Protection, the folks that made the technology possible and the setup today, our hosts, Groundwork Elizabeth, Candace Perry, who really led this effort, and her team. Thank you so much. And to all of you for being here. This week is Air Quality Awareness Week, so it couldn't be a more appropriate topic. And many of these things were just the tip of the iceberg of much larger programs and discussions that we could have. We didn't anticipate that we could cover everything, and we hope the conversation will continue with your partnership. And if you could walk away with anything, it's 1-877-WARN-DEP. That's the number to call when you see something, to report it, to get action. And if we can't help you on a particular issue, we can put you in touch with the right state, federal, local partner who would have jurisdiction to guide you towards a cleaner tomorrow. But let's give it up for these folks who are here today. Really appreciate their leadership.
Yes, thank you for that, Commissioner. And I'll just say one last point is that if you have a non-emergency, non-environmental incident thing to bring to our attention, you can always email the Office of Environmental Justice. So I recommend that is the best way to get into the department, and then we can connect you to our colleagues here on the panel or elsewhere within the department. So it's environmentaljustice@dep.nj.gov. So environmentaljustice@dep.nj.gov, and we'll get back to you with your question or concern. So thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you next time.
Nice work. Good.